So, David, there isn't a one size fits all for home buying and home selling.
No, I wish.
Right? I know.
It'd make our job a lot easier.
There are some trends that you can take into account and, things like that. But taking the plunge of buying and or selling, it's really an individual thing, right?
Definitely.
So talk to me, like, what elements should a person be taking into consideration when thinking about buying or selling or doing both from your perspective in the lending world?
Yep. So that's a big question. And, maybe before we talk about like what should be looked at, let's talk about what should definitely not be the thing that's looked at, which is comparing what the mortgage payment is compared to what you're paying for rent. And making your decisions solely on that. There could not be a poorer methodology to take when making the decision to potentially step into homeownership.
Tell me about that. Why?
Yeah, well, look, so it gets into now what should you be analyzing? Buying a home and stepping into homeownership is more than the increase from your rent to your mortgage payment, because it's really an integrative decision that takes into consideration like a lot of different facets of your life. Like number one, a mortgage payment and rent are not created equal, right? No. Right. A rent is money you're paying to someone else. It gains you nothing. It earns nothing. It is purely an outgoing expense.
You
right?
never get it back.
That's right. It's not even like a car payment. At least when you pay your car off, you own the car.
Right.
And hopefully there's some value left and you can go sell it to you and you can give me money for it, right? When you're renting a home, there is nothing other than the experience of living there and the time that you spent there with your family, right? Those memories and things that you've built there. When you have a mortgage payment, it consists of a lot of different things. Of course, there's the principal and interest of the mortgage. Well, 100% of every dollar you're paying to interest on that mortgage is a tax deduction. That's real dollars, dude.
Yeah, baby.
Like big time. In addition to that, you have to pay for some insurance, right? If your house gets struck by lightning and burns to the ground, we want to make sure we rebuild it. And then there's property taxes. And you know what they say about taxes, right? There's only two things certain in life, death and taxes. Yes. But also 100% of the property taxes that you're paying to whatever county you're living in, Riverside, it works all the same, is also tax deductible. So for a lot of first-time home buyers, people are getting tax deductions, Katherine, like to the tune of like $30,000, sometimes more, depending on their price point. If you're at like a marginal tax rate, which you would be if you had enough income to buy a $600,000 or $700,000 house, right? If you're at a marginal tax, let's just call it 25%, and you have a $30,000 write-off, that's like putting $7,000 into your pocket. Right? If you look at that over the course, I would
love for you to put $7,000 in my pocket too.
I would love for somebody to put $7,000 in my pocket too. But you and I are both homeowners, so we are effectively doing that. But that has to be taken into consideration. And then, additionally to that, the other part of it, the principal of the mortgage payment, right? The other half of the interest. I wish it was half, but for the first 5-10 years of that loan, it's almost primarily interest, which really helps you maximize the taxable benefit. But even the principal, whether it's $500, $700, $800, $900 a month, you're actually paying off a mortgage, right? So that's like putting money into a savings account.
Yes,
because one day you will be selling that home, more than likely. And the difference between what you're selling it for and how much you remain owing on that mortgage is in fact your money. And if you're a married couple, you can make $500,000 of profit without paying 1 penny of income taxes on that. Show me another investment out there that gives you $500,000 tax-free.
Don't know of one.
That's huge. So big advantages, right? So all of that has to be taken into consideration. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that people should be taking on debts that they have like no plausible comfort level of doing.
No. Own the house. Don't let the house own you.
Amen.
I have that conversation with people in every buyer consultation that I have.
For sure. So it takes an integrative analysis, right? It should involve a team, right? Not only your real estate professional, your agent to be able to really give you a tempo on the market, your finance professional that can break some of these things down for you, but also even at times, depending on somebody's financial portfolio, their tax preparer, their financial advisor, right? Their attorney. I mean, when I like it the best when we just get everybody huddled in and we're all just putting our heads together to say, how can we make life improve and start building some legacy for this young family? That's amazing. Like I'm so blessed that we get to do that.
They do. They need to prepare now for their future purchase.
No doubt.
I mean, preparation is key, getting your savings in place, making sure your credit is in place, knowing what loan product you want to use. If you're selling a home, do the repairs and improvements over time, or the decluttering over time to reduce that stress and also help spread the budget. I think all of that planning can really just ease the whole experience and make it so much better when they are ready. And to your point about the right team, I think doing that consultation now is key, because especially with someone like you or someone like me, where we've talked before how empowerment is so just quintessential to the way that we work. Having that team in place so that you can put that plan together and methodically work through it so that you're streamlined when it's time. Would you not say?
I would say for sure, but I wanted to ask you a question, your opinion. I'm curious.
No questions allowed.
This idea of the value of empowerment and the value of planning and the sitting down with the team and going through the numbers. Have you seen a shift in today's seller of how previous sellers that were no longer first-time homebuyers, right? Because to me, it's always seemed that like we were always pointing that kind of education and preparedness at first-time homebuyers, and then there was this thought like, "Oh, I've done that before. It's going to be the same again." Do sellers still feel that way, or do you find that some of the sellers you're working with are like back to being first-time homebuyers, not really understanding what the heck is going on?
It's crazy that you asked that, because we literally, in one of our we were saying goodbye to one of the families that we sold a very unique property for them in Fallbrook, and they're moving to Virginia. And we were talking with them, and they were very sweetly giving us some testimonials. And they've bought and sold several homes. And the husband got teary-eyed in talking about the experience, because they actually had their home listed with another realtor who was a professional connection on the wife's side. And he was talking about night and day difference, the consultation and recognizing how different it is to sell a home in today's market, and how it really takes a tribe to get it done. What it took to sell your home even 3-4 years ago is vastly different to what it takes to sell your home today. So honestly, I don't care if you've bought and sold 30 homes over, your lifetime. What worked then may not fully work now.
For sure.
And so that consultation is key. And having a real estate team, both lender and realtor, of really having their finger on the pulse, because we're in this every day, right, Dave. And you see what's happening as rates change and the expectation. And I kind of equally work with as many buyers as sellers, and I'm very intentional about that, because I want to have an understanding of both sides of the table of what that looks like, so that I can serve my clients best. And just having my finger on the pulse of what the expectation is on both sides has really helped me to be able to pivot and adjust. And sometimes it's a week by week adjustment.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. Like every week I'm updating our buyers and sellers on what's going on. And if we don't have them in escrow yet, it's like, okay, what do we need to do next?
You bring up the point, the pivot. I've been doing this for 22 years and have been very blessed of having a very stable, very consistent business. And, we don't put like billboards on freeways and stuff. Like we just do people right, and then they tell people about us, and that's like the only way that like my team works. But I got to tell you, over the last 22 years, of course we've had to pivot over that time and relearn how to advise people. But there has been more of that in the last 3 years than in the entire 22 years put together.
I agree.
There's no question about it. So good for you. I mean, my only regret with all of that is that a lot of times your consumer doesn't have a lot of clarity into whether they're working with people that share that sentiment, right? Are they really keeping abreast of what's going on? Are they really keeping their finger on the pulse? Or are they just licensed and you really have no idea? Like there's no place where we get to like log all our hours and education and time for the consumer to see it. So I would just say, if you're a consumer out there, just do your due diligence. You know, it's surprising to me. Some people talk about more about where they're going to go to dinner tonight than who they're going to hire to represent them in the biggest financial decision they're ever going to make. It's crazy.
It's true. I think that's where that consultation, or as you like to call yours, your Empower Hour.
Yeah.
You know, I love that. I totally want to.
It's kind of like unicorns and cotton candy, but
no, I love that though, because that's truly what it is, you know, and I think that's where that initial consultation is key. And I've heard on so many occasions where people go, okay, well, we're not ready we want to sit down with you, Katherine, but we're not ready yet. Let me just get this, that, and the other done, or let me, you know, whether or not it's for buying or selling. And then I encourage them of saying, look, it's not about whether or not you want to do something now or a year from now or 3 years from now. Sitting down now and having that consultation to see what are your goals, what are the things that are important to you and your family, where are you trying to go and why? Having that partnership, with what I see, I'm going to be able to give you that kind of that launch you forward of however big your runway is to get you set up. And same with you, of giving you that plan, whether that plan is a 2-year plan or a 3-month plan. Either way, you are being empowered and you're being set up for success.
No doubt. So I get asked that a lot, right? Like, Dave, when's the time to start doing this analysis? And I said, well, whatever emotion you had that led you to being on this call with me today, you've already made the decision that now is the time to plan, right? Because the most, you know, I talk about this concept of runway, right? And what I mean by runway is time. In the instances where I've had the most runway to work with a customer, a family, right, to help not just get them a loan, but to optimize and get them the best loan at the best terms and the best interest rate, is when we've had that time. The time when I'm introduced to people and it's like, oh, we got our offer accepted yesterday, we got to get this closed in 19 days. And like, we have to work with what we've got at that moment because there's not any time. We can do it. I mean, and we do it a lot because a lot of people, they become driven and motivated by the home. And then they backfill everything else. Like, oh, now we got to get the money and the loan and all of that. So much more stressful though. So much more stressful. When we send people and we're doing this analysis, and by the way, nobody should ever have a cost associated for this, right? This is what we do. A lot of people consider their product, especially in the financial side. A lot of my competitors out there like consider their product a home loan, right? Like that's what we're selling. We're selling you getting a loan for the home. We don't. Our product is that Empower Hour, right? Yeah. Our product is empowerment and putting people in the driver's seat. Sometimes the data we give them is very instrumental in them deciding, you know what, this is not the time for us to buy. But you know what? They sleep better at night, Katherine.
It's true.
Yeah. Instead of just like wondering, going to bed every night, like, is it possible? Could this be? I mean, that's really stressful. It wears on you over time.
It's true. Okay. So in that Empower Hour, you're doing a complete financial analysis.
Complete. We'll underwrite the loan.
Right. So talk to me, a pre-qualification versus that complete financial analysis. Which is right for you? How do you know?
Well, there's some banking institutions where I could go on my browser right now, answer 9 questions, and print a pre-qualification letter. So a pre-qualification.
That's scary for me as a listing agent.
It should be scary for everybody.
But yes.
But consumers sometimes just don't know. Right? They don't know the difference. Hey, the letter says I'm pre-qualified. So the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval is really just validation versus non-validation. If a lender gives you a pre-approval letter, but you have not submitted pay stubs, tax returns, they have not done verifications of employment directly with your human resource or payroll department, they have not looked at your assets, your bank statements, and checked the amount of deposits that you've had. I mean, you name it, full credit analysis, you are not pre-approved. But the letter says, Katherine, the letter says I'm approved. It's just, you know, there's no standardization of that form in our industry, which is a shame.
Yeah.
right? So we don't put a pre-approval letter out until we have an underwriter who is like, good to go. Now, we align with a company that gives us the ability to do that. You cannot, Wells Fargo or Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Chase will not underwrite your file before you go find a home.
And here's another little tidbit with that, that I think a lot of consumers don't realize is that they're not actually being pre-approved for a purchase price. They're being pre-approved for a payment
We could
amount.
care less what the purchase price of that home is.
So can you just pull the veil back on that?
Yeah.
Because that's something that I discuss in my consult with all of our buyers every time. And we talk about, I don't ask them, hey, what's your budget for a purchase price? I ask them, hey, what's your comfort level for a payment?
For a payment, right.
So talk about that.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of the car business, right? You don't want to be payment driven in the car business, right? Because they say that's kind of shady because they manipulate the financing just to get to that payment. That's not how it works in lending. That is exclusively what lenders are looking at is Katherine's capacity to actually pay us back this money. So the evaluation comes in taking a look at, of course, your income, right? And income, I ask people all the time, like, hey, so how much money do you make? Oh, Dave, I make $85,000 a year. But when we look at their pay stubs and verifications of employment, that's 65,000 of it was their regular salary, and 20,000 was a one-time bonus because the company did super, super duper good, right? If income
or that overtime that's not consistent,
right?
Or
hey, the company was down some people, so they had us kick in extra hours, but now they hired the person, right? So anything that does not have the reasonable expectation that it's going to continue, we can't count it at all. So that what I just said right there, that borrower's income would be 65,000. So if you went into that bank and it said, how much money do you make? And you wrote $85,000, you're wrong. And so is the pre-qualification. So we look at somebody's income once we go through that whole analysis, and then we look at their debt profile, right? And a lot of people incorrectly think that it's the amount of debt. Oh, Dave, I have $25,000 of credit card debt, so I need to pay that off before I'll get qualified.
No.
Not necessarily. All we're interested in is the minimum monthly payment associated with that debt. Should you pay more? Great, good for you, right? But we're only looking at the minimum payments you have to do.
From a lending
perspective, right? And just because a computer says, hey, you're qualified for a $5,000 mortgage, doesn't mean the buyers at the end of the day are comfortable with it. Some people eat top ramen, some people eat filet mignon. It just is what it is.
With lobster.
But it's really that analysis, right? The debt to income analysis and how the anticipated mortgage payment fits into that analysis. So if we tell somebody okay, Katherine, you're good to go up to a $4,000 mortgage payment, right? And then your natural question is like, okay, what does that mean? What kind of house can I buy?
Right.
Right? We'll go in and because we have to give you kind of like a starting point, right?
Yes.
And we'll say, okay, you can buy with your down payment and your credit and your loan program, you could buy potentially a $600,000 home. Well, I can show you a $600,000 home with a $4,000 payment, and I can show you a $600,000 house.
I'm so glad you went there.
With a $5,000 payment.
Yep. And why?
There's a lot of other factors aside from the mortgage that will ultimately dictate what a mortgage payment is. Things like homeowners association dues. Property taxes are monstrous.
Yep.
And then you speak on this a lot, like what's going on with insurance right now.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you touched on that, because that's one of the things when we have that consultation, we talk about, okay, where would you like your payment to be? What's that max that you want me to hold you accountable to? Because some buyers are emotional buyers and they're like, oh, okay, I can't have a payment more than this. But then they walk in a house and they're like, okay, I'll pay whatever, and so, we hold them accountable to that. But when before we even step foot in a house, Daniel and I will do, actually Daniel's my payment guy. He'll do all those payment estimates, and we look up the property taxes for that house. There may be one neighborhood, like thinking about Wolf Creek area. On one side of the main road, it's super low property taxes. On the other side of the road, it's super high property taxes. Their Millaroo's are like over $4,000 a year on top of your tax base. And like you said, that hugely impacts. Yeah. If you're in a high fire zone, what's your insurance going to be? So, I'm checking in and going, okay, what should we estimate for insurance on this one? Granted, it's an estimate. Where are rates at this week? Looking up the property taxes, and we're doing that estimate, and we'll actually say, okay, this is where you're, based on the list price, this is where your payment would roundabout be. Are you comfortable with that? So that at least when you walk into the house, you have that expectation. And then if you get it for a little bit less, okay. If you get it for a little bit more, okay, at least you have that expectation. But that's huge for a buyer.
It's monstrous. And unfortunately, I think your average buyer doesn't realize how huge that is, right? Because the only time it bites them, it stings them in the backside, as they say, right, is when they're 3 weeks into a 30-day escrow and they get a call that says, ding dong, your loan is dead, right? In the meantime, the moving truck is already circling the block, right?
Which wouldn't happen to us. Because we've done that work. We do that work. However, now thinking as a listing agent, when I'm receiving offers that I'm going to present to my seller, I do what's called scrubbing the deal. And so I look at all the details. I have the conversation with the agent. I have the conversation with the lender. I'm looking at certain data points, and I'm looking at that debt to income ratio. I'm looking at those financial pieces, and I want to know, okay, that DTI, okay, what's the max DTI that you can do on that loan program you're doing for them? I want to know, okay, if they sneeze, is this deal going to fall apart?
Right.
Did that lender take into account the fact that there is like another $4,000 of mellow-roos a year on that? Did they take into account that it is in a probably in a high fire zone, your insurance is going to be more? Because that makes a difference on their qualification, and so that pre-qualification letter to me is, I don't want to say it's nothing, but kind of is. Like, I want to have that conversation with the lender and know, is this buyer financially solid? Because number one, I want my sellers to be able to move forward confidently and start packing.
Sure.
And I want that buyer to get their keys day, because we love keys day.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal, and we've upped our game significantly in that front, specifically because of the insurance. I mean, we've always done the similar thing where we're cranking out analysis. Sometimes we're putting a grid together with 8 to 10 different homes that they're going to go tour. So that way, when they're standing in the living room, there's no question as to what the payment will be on this particular house. They have that data with them.
Preach, brother.
But now, when we're submitting offers, right, like every single offer, of course, you communicating with your listing agent if you're representing the buyer, hugely important. But like, it's a pretty important call to come from me as well, because what we do, especially when we're working with savvy listing agents like you are,
that know the questions to ask.
Well, I don't always depend on that fact. A lot of times I'm not working with, I'm just like,
sadly,
really?
about 90% of the time, I don't think that's the case.
I mean, I sit there, Katherine, and I go, really? They got this listing, huh? Like, really? I feel so bad for the sellers. But anyway, what we do is we're really forward with that, right? In fact, we're to the point now where I'm securing insurance quotes on behalf of the borrower. Not that they have to or should use that insurance person. I just want to let the listing agent know we have a pathway to get this done, right? And I got to tell you, it's been instrumental. I think our ability to help get an offer accepted is far better than your average bear, because we lift the veil. Of course, with the customer's permission, right? We always discuss that with them, but we're not just saying, hey, here's a letter. What we're saying is, here's all the backup that inspired us to write the letter. And I think that's the differentiator. And I just wish that customers knew that should be something they demand from people, instead of just like when I tell people, they're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't know that was going to happen. I just wish that was the standard, You
literally summed up where all of this leads to is you don't know what you don't know.
Amen to that.
And that's why it is so important to have that Empower Hour or have that consultation and really align yourself with the right real estate team so that you can be empowered and so that you can sell and or buy with complete confidence.
One of the biggest objections that people used to have, like to embark on that journey, right, is they didn't want to have their credit report run. Because in their mind, they're trying to protect their credit, as they should, right? You should always be protective of your credit. And so that was kind of somewhat valid, especially if their thought was, hey, our lease isn't up until 9 months from now, so we'll do it when we get closer, right? There's no point in running our credit right now. And there was some validity to that objection, right? We would be sensitive to that and say like, okay, you're right. But now we're able to complete that full analysis by only running a soft credit pull on the borrower, so there is zero negative impact to their credit. So there's no cost. We don't need a credit card, a checkbook. there's no hard credit pull, so there's no cost from a credit score standpoint. So Katherine, really at the end of the day, it is purely a
gold.
Win-win situation.
Yeah, it
Right?
is. It is gold. I think in just wrapping up, instead of fear of the unknown, because that's what really what it is what we don't know causes that anxiety and can cause that fear. Instead of that, be empowered by your real estate team and see what your true possibilities are. And I have chills.
I love it. I love it. I'm so glad we did this.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you, Katherine.